All right, our learning target today is to find domain and range from a graph. And I'm going to tell you exactly what that means here in a minute. We're going to get you guys feeling pretty confident about that. Now, this is going to be on our test, but I'm not going to grade this part of the test this time around. We might make a bonus. I got to talk to them. There's more. Oh, yeah, I do have more. Who else needs one? Okay, thank you. Did you get one? Yeah, you got yourself one. Okay. Anybody else need one? Okay, sorry about that. Thank you for passing those out. I'm going to go over this, but I don't think it's really fair to teach you this on Tuesday and then turn around and test you on it next Monday. There's just not enough time for people to like practice it and feel confident on it. It is, however, remember I said you're going to take it the chapter 1 test twice. I will grade it the second time around after we've had a chance to practice it. Okay, so I don't want you to be nervous about this. If you don't quite get it today, that's okay. You're going to see it on the test. You'll do the best you can on it, but it's not actually going to count for points on the test. Okay, unless it's bonus. Does that make you feel a little bit better about this? I know sometimes it makes people nervous when they're learning something right before a test because it's like, what if I have questions? Don't worry, okay? So I'm going to show you this, but before I show you the main thing, which is domain and range, I got to teach you a little bit about this thing called interval notation. So I want you to write this down. So we sort of have a little cheat sheet that we can use when we get into the main goal, which is domain and range. So interval notation, and this is going in our blue packets. Yep. Interval notation kind of looks like an ordered pair. You know how when you write a point, it's like an X value, comma, Y value? It kind of looks like that because you're always going to give me two numbers with a comma in between, but it's not going to be an X coordinate and a Y coordinate. Instead, it's going to be a starting value and an ending value. So when we talk about an interval, you can think of an interval as like time, right? This week, what was the date for the beginning of this week? The beginning of this week was Sunday, right? And that was October 1st. So that would be my starting value. What is going to be the date of the last day of this week? The 7th? Yes, the 7th. Saturday is the 7th, right? So this week starts on the 1st and it goes through the 7th, right? So I've just given you the beginning and the end of this week by giving you a number where it starts and a number where it ends. The whole week would be in between the 1st and the 7th, okay? That's kind of how this works. Now, in addition to this, we're also going to put either square brackets or parentheses around these. Sometimes we use square brackets, sometimes we use parentheses, and sometimes we mix and match. Sometimes we'll have square brackets on one side and a parenthesis on the other side. And here's your cheat sheet for how that works. You're going to use a square brackets anytime that number is included. And you're going to use parentheses anytime that number is excluded. So if I go back to my example that we were talking about a second ago, we said the first day of this week was Sunday, it was the 1st, right? And the last day was the 7th. So we go from the 1st to the 7th. Now, the 1st, was the 1st part of this week? Was Sunday part of this week? Yes or no? It is included as part of the week, right? So what will we put around that? Square bracket or parenthesis? We put a square bracket around it. And then was the 7th part of this week, or will it be part of this week? Yes, it would get a square bracket also. But sometimes we wouldn't include it. We could actually do it this way. We could say it's the 1st through the 8th, but the 8th isn't actually part of the week. So we'd put a parenthesis around it. That would mean we start on the 1st, we include the 1st, and we go right up to the beginning of the 8th, but we don't actually include the 8th. All right. The way you're going to see this on a graph is included points will typically be represented as a solid point. Excluded points will typically be represented as a hollow dot. Included can also be any point that's actually on the graph, and we're going to see examples of that in a moment. Now, I'm expecting that most of you right now are like, I don't really get what's going on here, but hopefully we've gotten to the point that you trust me that we'll see a couple examples and we'll get a better feel for it. So we're going to switch over to that white handout that you got a moment ago. And we're going to work through a couple examples. And as we start doing these examples, this is going to start making some more sense to you. All right, so we were going to be using interval notation to talk about domain and range. This is our main goal for today. All right, so here's the big thing I need you to know. Domain gives us all of the x values that are on the graph, and range gives us all of the, what do you want to guess? The y values, yeah. Domain goes with x, range goes with y. So I'm going to walk you through finding domain and range, and we're going to be using that interval notation that we just talked about. So if you've got your blue packet kind of off to the side, that might be helpful for you. So for the domain, you're going to give me two numbers with a comma in between. You got to tell me where it starts, where the graph starts, and where it ends. Now, when we're talking x values on a graph, is that up and down or is that left and right? Left and right? And when we're talking left and right, when you're reading, what side do you start on? You start on the left and you move to the right. So I'm going to start on the left. So I would like you to find on this graph, what is the leftmost point? What point is furthest to the left? And put your pencil on that point. Find me the point that is furthest to the left. The left is that way. And put your pencil on it. Are you looking at that point right there? Can you tell me the x value for that point right there? -2. Go ahead and write that down for your starting point. This starts on the left at -2. Now, look at that dot there. Is it an open dot or a closed dot? Closed dot. So what's that mean about square brackets and parentheses? Square brackets. All right, we're halfway there. You guys are doing awesome. Now, this next part is a little tricky, okay? Trick question. On the graph, this starts on the left at -2. At this point, that's the furthest to the left. How far to the right does this graph go? This is a trick question. How far to the right, that's going this way, does this graph go? It doesn't really stop, does it? This arrow tells us that this thing is going to keep moving off that and kind of diagonally upwards forever and ever and ever, right? Isn't it going to go off to the right forever? So do we have a number or a symbol that we can write for forever and ever and ever and ever? What's that word? Starts with an I. Infinity. Yeah, do you guys know what the symbol for infinity looks like? It's like a sideways 8, right? And can you ever actually get to infinity? No. So it gets a parentheses. Infinity is always going to get a parenthesis because you can't actually get there. It has no value. It's a concept. It's an abstract concept, right? So this graph starts on the left at -2. That's the furthest to the left it goes. The furthest to the right it goes is positive infinity. Now, there is such a thing as negative infinity also. That's going to pop up in a second. All right, let's do our range now. The range goes with the y. And with range, we want to work from the bottom up to the top, the same way you would build a house, from the bottom up to the top. So look at this graph and tell me, how low does it go? What's the lowest point? Put your pencil on it. It's the lowest point on the graph. And tell me, what is the y value of that point? It's going to be negative something. Negative what? -4? Okay, so this starts at -4. And there is a point on the graph. In fact, there's millions and millions of points here. And one of them is at -4. So that gets a square bracket because that is on the graph. So that's where it starts at the bottom. Where does it end at the top? How high does this graph go? It keeps going up and up and up and up and up forever. We would call that infinity, which always gets a parenthesis. Okay. So this is our first example. I'm still expecting that people are kind of thumb meter. We're probably kind of down towards, I still don't get this. We're going to do a couple more and this is going to start coming together for you, okay? All right, look at this next one. So we're going to do domain first. Domain is left to right. So find the furthest to the left on this graph. What point is furthest to the left? Put your pencil on it. And tell me, what is the x value for that point? It's at -2. Parenthesis or square bracket for that? Square bracket because it's a solid dot, comma. All right, and then to the right, how far to the right does it go? It keeps going forever and ever and ever, so infinity. All right, tell me about the range. For the range, we do this, we read from bottom to top, the same way we build a house. What is the lowest point on the graph? In fact, there's a couple points that are kind of tied for lowest point, aren't there? But what's the y value is the same for both of them. What's the y value for both of those low points? 1. So that's my lowest y value. And there's a solid dot there, so I'm going to go ahead and put a square bracket. So that's the lowest it goes. What's the highest it goes? It's going to keep going up forever and ever, up to infinity. All right, you guys are doing great. Let's keep it going. Let's keep it going. We got some good momentum going here. Number 3, domain is left and right. Find me the furthest point to the left, if there is one. How far to the left does this graph go? Negative infinity. Keeps going to the left. It never really stops going to the left. So that's negative infinity because it's going to the left. How far does it go to the right? Find me a point and put your pencil on it. The furthest to the right. And look at the x value for that point. The x value is, it's really hard to read this, but is that a 4? You guys have much better eyes than I do. That's a 4. And do I want a square bracket or a parenthesis? Why parenthesis for this one? It's an open dot, so it gets a parenthesis. All right, you guys are getting the hang of this. All right, range goes with y. Always start from the bottom, the same way you'd build a house. What's the lowest point on this graph? That same one right here. Now, but we want a y coordinate. Ooh, I said couple of people just said 4. You made my favorite mistake for these is flip flopping x's and y's. It's so easy to do. We want y values, so -16, right? And we said that was an open dot, so that gets a parenthesis. How high does it go? Ooh, positive or negative? It's going up. It's going up, 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 up forever and ever. That would be positive infinity. It's heading in the positive direction because it's going up. You got to train your eyes to focus on just the y value, and it's definitely going into the positive y values there. All right, one last one together, and then I'm gonna have you guys finish this up. I love number 4. This is my favorite one on here. All right, domain. How far does this one go to the left? So, but it's going to the left, so positive or negative? Negative, because it's in the negative direction. Negative x. You got to focus on the x values. Negative infinity on the left. How far does it go to the right? Positive infinity. Negative infinity to positive infinity. If I tell you to take all the numbers between negative infinity and positive infinity, what does that look like? That's everything, isn't it? That's like all the numbers that could possibly be. That's every single number out there. Has anybody ever heard the phrase all real numbers? Has that come up in your math classes before? All real numbers. There's another way to say this would be to write out the words all real numbers. There is actually a symbol for this that's really simple to write. Some of you like shortcuts. If you draw a capital R and then you draw an extra bar on the left-hand edge of it, that is the symbol for all real numbers, basically everything from negative infinity to infinity. It's called the double bar R. Kind of, yeah. In a textbook, it usually looks more like that. Yeah. Some people say it looks like an IR, but it's actually just an R with an extra line on it. Double bar R is what that's called. All right, tell me about the range. How low does this graph go? Negative infinity. Yeah, it's going down and down and down forever and ever. And how high does it go? Goes up to positive. Oh, we could have done double bar R for this one too. All right, I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to do as many of the rest of these as you can. There are some tricky ones on here. I will tell you that I got number 5, the next one, I got it wrong this morning. I totally messed that one up. And one of my students corrected me. It's pretty impressive when somebody just learned something and they're correcting their teacher. All right, so see if you can figure out what my mistake was and what the correct answer is. We'll come back together in 5 minutes. All right, let me get your attention, please. Shh. Put it on pause because you guys are going to come back and work with your groups here in a second. Hey, let me show you my mistake that I made on number 5. I think it's a pretty good mistake. And it's especially good because I learned something and I recovered from it. So when I ask myself the question, how far to the left does this graph go? That's pretty easy to see that it goes all the way to this point. It doesn't go any further past this to the left. And my X value there is -5. And so that gets a square bracket. So that part I felt comfortable about. And then I asked myself the question, how far to the right does the graph go? And I looked at this point right here and I said, that's the furthest to the right. And I put a 3, but that's wrong. Because why? Because of this arrow. What's this arrow telling me this graph is going to do? It's going to go right down here and it's going to keep going and going and going and going. It's going to go right off the edge of my paper, through that wall, and keep going forever and ever and ever out in outer space. So it shouldn't be a 3 here. How far to the right does this graph actually go? I need to make that an infinity. So let me show you the correct answers for the rest of these. I'd like you guys to look at them. I'm expecting that you probably made some mistakes and you might kind of feel like I don't get this at all right now, and that's okay. Because like I said, I am not testing you on this next week. We're going to have lots of time to practice this and get your questions answered in chapter 2. But have a look at these. The one that I told you you did not have the information to do was the last one. Anytime there's a single value, when I talk about the domain for 9, the domain, the X values start and end at 6. There's nothing but 6 on this graph. If it's a single value, we put them inside these curly braces like this. Are we talking about number 9? For number 8. Yep, so we go, it is always lowest to highest. When in the X direction, that means left to right. And the Y direction means bottom to top. Okay. Any others that you guys had questions about? All right. On the old out of 4, or sometimes I'll ask you out of 5 points, how do you feel about this? I'm expecting most people right now to be like at a 1 or 2. Okay, if you're there or better, then if you're feeling like at a 1 or 2 level of confidence out of 5 right now, that's good enough. We got a little foundation. We'll build on it. You are going to see this on the test, but this question on the test, and I'm not going to grade it. Okay. All right, we got to move on though. Okay, so it's time to switch gears and start talking about the test. So let me stop this.